All right, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So initially, I wasn't planning to do like any video on One Piece stuff for at least a good while. I was planning to take a break on it and everything, but I got spoiled on something that happened this chapter at the very end. The big twist from an unexpected kind of place. Because scrolling through TikTok and I stumbled upon this spoiler. And so I kind of wanted to check out if it's true or not because of how supremely stupid it was. So I decided I might as well check it out and see to see if it actually was true or not. Lo and behold, it was. So I figured mostly out of spite, I guess, that I wanted to do a quick video talking about it just for kind of posterity in case I'm right about what direction this is going. It was also amusing because I watched the videos of some other people that caught up on the news as well to see what their takes and thoughts were. And it was interesting how everyone kind of had the same or similar ideas, but there was one that they didn't touch upon, which I did. So again, video for posterity's sake, I thought I might as well, do a quick one talking about my personal idea on it before I kind of pieced out again. Before we get into that, I'm just going to also do a quick recap of the last 4 chapters. I want to say, just kind of quickly going over my thoughts because I haven't done any kind of reaction reviews for those, and I figure anyone that wants kind of my thoughts on it that doesn't follow me on Twitter, hasn't seen it, I figure I'll kind of quickly go over that before we touch on the chapter 1007 stuff. But yeah, I'm going to try to keep this video relatively short. I'm going to try to aim under 40 minutes or so. Hopefully we can do that. I'm not going to go super in depth into anything. This is kind of just tossing out a few of my thoughts and ideas and things out there in case anyone was interested. Yeah, with that said, actually one more channel related thing before I dive into it. So I'm still not back from hiatus just yet. This is kind of an exception to the rule sort of thing because I'm going to be busy at work for the next couple of weeks until at least the end of April. I'm just going to be kind of bogged down with work, so I won't be able to devote any time to the channel. Closer to the end of April, I'll probably put out a channel update with dates, times, things for when the read-throughs and stuff are coming back. That's still a month away, but just to let anyone that's curious kind of know what was happening with that. But yeah, without further ado, let us dive into some of the earlier stuff in here. Quick notes on chapter 1003, because I think 1002 was the last one that I did an actual video for. So quick notes on chapter 1003. The action paneling between the Kaido Supernova fight, still extremely messy, still not super compelling. And as much as I loathe the power scaling discussion, I gotta say, it feels like Oda has really been playing fast and loose with the strength levels of the Supernovas versus the Emperors. Like, I don't think I'd ever gotten to this spot where I said it's the least interesting thing going on in Wano, but it is definitely the least interesting aspect of it so far. I just don't care about the fight because messiness is kind of drawing me out of it, and I just don't care about Kid, Law, any of the fighters actually involved in the conflict, so that's the thing. The only thing that did pique my interest with regards to that was Kaido commenting on the strange hockey that he sensed in Enma and Oden's presence, which will be relevant kind of ideas on the latest chapter and stuff that happened, but we'll get to that later. Biggest highlight from 1003 is probably CP0 being revealed to be on Wano, because anyone that's followed me on Twitter, I think I've mentioned a few of my review videos, knows I've been harping on about a Marine presence on Wano, and more specifically, especially after the raid started, wondering when or how Orochi would get his battleship that CP0 promised him for the weapons. So it didn't go exactly how I thought, as they're already on Wano, and I figured that Orochi would call them and then summon them, and then we would see him actually bringing them into the island. But I guess that also went hand in hand because I also thought there would be a bigger Marine force that would have a presence in the battle itself. So it didn't go exactly how I thought, but it makes sense, storytelling point of view, that they'd already be here, given that the conflict is going to finish within a couple of hours. I still think is going to be when the fire festival ends, dawn breaks over Wano's when the arc will actually end. So I guess with that regard, it makes more sense that they'd already be here rather than, saying the Marines weren't there or what you have to call them, they'd have to spend, time getting to the island and everything. So no major complaints with regards to that. It's still too early to theorize on the role they'll play on in Wano overall, like whether they're just going to be observers the entire time or whether they're going to get their hands dirty at some point. I don't know. Given at this point, like they're currently expecting Luffy and Ko to lose and dent Kaido's armor a bit, so I'm still holding on to my initial theory idea that they're going to eventually take over Wano at the end. But right now, everything's kind of in flux because pieces are still moving everywhere. If I had to place a bet, though, based on how they're talking, I'm speculating they probably say, now that Orochi's dead, they'll probably reach out to Kaido directly, establish a new trading partner with him specifically. But like I said, that's based on how they think things are going to play out. And they're going to be surprised. So nothing much more to comment there. Most disappointing thing with this chapter was definitely Kaido's hybrid form. Not because the silhouette looks bad or anything, but because it looks like Oda was just waiting to reveal CP0 being there before he, kind of cut to Kaido's hybrid form because he's going to be like, oh, look, the things are going bad for the Alliance and all that crap that he's trying to pull. Which would only work if he hadn't undercut his own story so many times with the fake outs and the absolute lack of, stake, tension, consequences, all those kinds of things. So all of this kind of falls flat with him trying to pretend like, things are going badly and things are getting serious now. I don't think anyone really buys it. There are some stands that have deluded themselves into thinking that, stuff still matters and there is going to be, bad things can happen. I don't. So none of it really hits me with any kind of impact. I'll also admit I was holding out for personal theories regarding Kaido and Ko possibly being similar to the awakened jailer beast from Impel Down, which doesn't seem to be the case yet. I'm not ruling it out completely just yet because of what CP0 commented on in this chapter. I tried to dig up some old tweets because I know I've commented on this before. I tried to dig up some old tweets with it, but unfortunately I couldn't find any. And unfortunately, the One Piece podcast deleted my old editorials off their site in which I did go in depth into that, so I could have pointed to that as a kind of proof for it, but unfortunately can't do that. C'est la vie. So it is what it is. I'll try to see if I can dig it up from somewhere else, but I'm still holding on to we're going to see some kind of awakened form from them. But I don't know if that's actually going to take shape or not. I'll have to wait and see. That's chapter 1003 notes. Chapter 1004. I don't care for Tama Ex Machina. I know it's set up since the beginning of the arcs. I'm not saying, it was an asshole, like, oh, they just pulled it out of nowhere, and it's like bad storytelling and all that. It still is bad. Like I'm saying, it doesn't feel earned to me, and it really is too much of a convenient plot device. The same way that Sugar being able to, transform people into toys was kind of a very super convenient, overpowered plot device. So I don't really care for this, like that being the way that they're going to start overcoming the odds, which weren't even like that hard to overcome in the first place. So don't really care for it, but it is whatever. Like it was coming from a long time ago. It was only a matter of when. I think the reason it just doesn't land with any kind of impact is Kaido and his goons, I think, are by far the absolute weakest villains in the series thus far in terms of being an actionable threat to the Straw Hats, like their goals or anything like that. Like they're completely one dimensional. Like we don't know anything about them. Apart from their designs, like they haven't really lived up to their epithet to their names. Like King the Wildfire hasn't done any shit to earn his title of the Wildfire. Same with Queen the Plague. Like Queen has just been an absolute meme and a joke more so than a threat. But again, we'll get to that stuff because it comes later with the Frankie, with the Chopper making the cure stuff. And then moving on to the Usopp Naomi Frankie stuff, like, comedy felt like out of place again. Like Usopp and Naomi being like, ha ha ha, we tricked you and all that. Just felt like Oda checking off a checklist again. Like, oh, I need a comedy moment in this chapter. It didn't really mesh or feel like it was naturally put into there. Like, like the transition from them, like being actually scared to be like, oh, ha, ha, we're tricking you, didn't feel like this was something they actually planned. To feel like something Oda just kind of jammed in there to be like, ha ha ha, look, they know what they're doing. So, whatever. What else? I know that people are like now like sold on the idea that we're now getting like the final matchups for the arc, that we're getting, Robin and Brooke versus Black Maria. We're getting Frankie versus Sasaki. I don't really buy that Frankie is on Sasaki's level. Like the fight, like Frankie seems to be doing way too well against him. It seems too easy. Like I don't know, like given how much the Toby Roppo were hyped up as like being below the commander level, like just given like Frankie's relative strengths and like the strengths of his opponents thus far, I don't buy that he's on Sasaki's level or you can give him a good matchup. But who knows? Like I still don't personally buy that these are the final matchups that we've seen. Feels like things are still going to change or in flux, but I don't know. Like a lot of these chapters just feel like Oda's stalling because he wants to move certain pieces to certain places and kind of get like all the players together before he gets really into the meat of the conflict. But we'll see. Honestly, like the way he's been rushing it, this might just be him just doing bad rushing and pacing, which is why it feels like this. But we'll see. But that said, I think the moment we'll be able to tell that things are definitively starting, like this is the final setup of the matchups, and we're getting close to conclusion, is when we see the Flying Six of Toby Roppo in their hybrid forms, because it's still kind of weird. Sasaki's still just in his zone form, fighting Frankie. I think once he finally gets into his hybrid form, then we'll know that shit's getting serious. Which brings us to the shit G stuff, which, like, you all know how I feel about shit G, and this is like the third time in how many of our arcs Oda's pulled this stupid, this asshole has gotten this stupid situation where he's pretending to be the White Knight and going to rescue a woman, and it turns out it's a trap and he gets captured, but he's adhering to his values, so he's not going to actually do anything to fight back. I don't know why Oda keeps pulling this crap. Like, I don't know if he thinks it's amusing or people are going to be like, oh, look at G, he's being so chivalrous. Like, oh, what an idol. Like, I aspire to be like this fucking turd. I don't know. Like, it's not funny. It's not even good storytelling. I don't get what the point is apart from pissing people off. Like, it's just garbage. But honestly, like, Oda just fucking seems to like doubling down on this shit. So whatever. And then the silhouette stuff, I won't touch on that again until we get to the last chapter because that's relevant then. I will say my initial thought was that this was Hiyori, given that she's one of the pieces left to play on the board, and we haven't really seen her since she left at the start before the raid started. But like I said, we'll get to that because there's other theories being tossed out on who that is. And then chapter 1005. Shit G again. Like, so I'll admit it was a little bit validating to see even some hardcore One Piece stands getting pissed off with this stupid scenario with Shit G. But it didn't make it any less annoying than seeing the other half of the fandom going, "Oh, this is growth for Shitchi because he's finally calling for help and admitting he has a weakness and that he can't fight women." Like, no, that's not what any of this was. And like honestly, these like the stands are so willing to just give Oda like just praise the shit out of Oda for the absolute like bare minimum, and it's just kind of just got like worse and worse and worse as the series is going on. But whole nother discussion. And like the thing that bugs me about this scenario is like, never mind that this asshole ran off by himself, because he's like, "Oh, I sense a woman in trouble because my hockey's so attuned with this," because he always thinks with his dick. Never mind that he literally could have escaped at any time when he was being chased by, Black Maria and her goons by using the invisible raid suit and just yeeting himself the fuck out of there and being like, "Oh, hey, there's enemies there," getting someone or the other strats to fight. But for the sake of a contrived joke going, "Ha ha ha ha, now Shitchi's the damsel in distress and he needs a powerful girl boss to come and rescue him." Like, like that's the thing I think that pissed me off the most about this chapter, apart from the Shitchi stuff, is I've been waiting forever for Robin to finally get a one-on-one fight again. And like majority of fans, like I was thinking, yeah, it's probably going to end up being Black Maria. I expect it to be super cool. It should be nice to finally see her getting a fight. But having it take the shape of, a tacky kind of like empowering girl boss moment where Robin's like, "Don't worry, Sanji, I'll come to the rescue to save you." Like, it just left such a sour taste in my mouth with being like, like Robin coming in and acting almost out of character, like, spouting off these, like supposedly like cool lines, trying to be bad. It's like it didn't feel like we were seeing Robin. It was felt like we were seeing someone else in her place. So, like, honestly, if this is how we're gonna get it, I'd rather just not have her have a fight at all. This is what we're gonna get. But the other thing, like, that was bugging me, like this was seeing on Twitter, was the split between, like, the diehard One Piece fans and the more critical fan reactions to this. Because the diehard fans are trying to spin it like, "Oh shit, she called for Robin because he has faith in her, blah blah blah." "Oh, he wasn't trying to betray her or sell her out or anything, or he wasn't being stupid and all that." The other fans are kind of rightly getting mad at him for calling Robin into, a trap, into what could have been a trap scenario that he was being set up in. Because he could have literally called for any of the other Straw Hats to come and help him, which would still maintain, the whole bullshit the fans are trying to spin of, "Oh shit, she's finally growing, like asking for help and all that." But no, he calls the one person that they actually want to walk into this trap. And the thing is, like, the first argument really only works when deep down you kind of convinced yourself and you just know, subconsciously that there won't be any lasting consequences for the Straw Hats continually putting each other in danger and doing stupid shit, like this. This is a complaint I've had about Luffy before, like where he does reckless things and people are like, "Oh, that's just the way he is. You can't expect him to change." And it's like, yeah, he's not going to change because there's never a consequence for him doing reckless shit or putting his friends in danger, because they'll just write it off as being like, "Oh, that's just the way he is. Nothing will ever happen. Like, no one's going to die. No one's going to lose a limb. Nothing dangerous like that will ever happen." And so, of course, if you know that, you can spout out, like, these platitudes of, like, "Oh, they trust each other. It's the power of friendship. Like, oh, they just got to believe in each other." Like, that only works if you kind of accept the fact that there won't ever be a consequence for them being dumb shits like this. And that's why, to me, it's like, that's why it doesn't really matter if Shitchi is potentially leading Robin into a trap, because, again, nothing serious will come of it. Something happens to Robin, none of the Straw Hats are going to be like, "Oh, Shitchi, you know what? How come you led her into a trap like that? Couldn't you have done something else? Like, why'd you just let yourself get caught?" And, like, I don't want to get into a whole digression about that, because I could do a whole thing about, the lack of growth or character arcs for a character being tied to the lack of consequence. But I'll probably do like a mini video on that at some point later, or maybe as a musings thing. But it just bugs me because these kinds of arguments, where they have like, oh, X character has faith, or you have to believe, is just a tool to deflect criticism and ensure you don't have to critically engage with or think about a work, because you can just kind of justify as being like, oh, everything will be okay. This is going to happen like this. And then get like what I'm saying, like that makes it easier for you to just kind of disengage your brain and be like, no, I have to think about it too deeply. But I don't know. I hate that most of the more and more of the fandom are kind of getting into that mindset of like, oh, if we think too deeply about it, it's going to make me feel bad, or I'm not going to enjoy it anymore. So I'm just going to shut my brain off and not have to think about it. But again, digression. That could be a whole nother conversation about fandom discourse. But I just wanted to put it out there because Shitchi just makes me so angry because he has become the most garbage character in the series. And it's gotten bad when it gets to the point that even die-hard stands, people that have the most milquetoast criticisms of the series to date, even they're kind of going like, hey, does Oda hate Sanji or something? Like, does he have an issue with his character? Is he going out of his way, to make him into a joke? When these people are now starting to question how this character is being written, then something is up with how you've been writing him and how you've been approaching him. When those stands are even like, hey, something suspect about the way this is being played out. But yeah, honestly, like the less we see of that asshole, the better. All that ranting out. Moving past that, couple of quick speculative things before we move on. I feel like there's going to be some kind of cracker twist with Black Maria. For those of you that don't know who Cracker is and what I'm talking about, back in Whole Cake Island, one of Big Mom's generals was called Cracker. And initially on like his wanted poster, he was this bearded guy with like these 4 arms and everything. And during the fight, it turned out that actually no, the form that we saw in the form that was on the wanted poster was apparently just like a puppet, for lack of a better word, made out of crackers. And the real guy was actually hiding inside like a cracker suit, like a biscuit suit that he had made and created with his powers to kind of protect himself or some bullshit. So I feel like that's the twist that's going to happen with Black Maria as well. Partly just because her spider form as it is doesn't make sense. Like I know people are like, oh, Oda's based it off a certain spider yokai, and the design is like that, etc., etc. But it still doesn't make sense because if you look at her spider form, like the spider lower half that she's riding on has like the eyes and mouth and everything, and we've never seen a Zoan like that. So unless Oda's suddenly saying or gonna suddenly reveal that, oh, she's such a expert Zoan fruit user that she somehow has managed to make the spider like that. I feel like we're setting it up for being like, she's just riding on one of her subordinates who's also a spider, especially because if you look at her subordinates, you had, the women subordinates, and you also had kind of the Okama subordinates that she also had, which were the ones, she had no problem beating up. So given that kind of duality in her thing and like the whole, her shtick being like, oh, I make people my slaves and make them desire me and all that, I feel like that's the twist we're going with. Again, I'm just putting that out there for posterity to see if I'm right or not. So we'll see. I just want to quickly touch on that. And it's also because Brooke Robin also double teaming her is why I also that'll be the twist, was to be a 2-on-2 battle rather than 2-on-1. Finding out one more thing. Finding out the cyborg animals did make me kind of briefly wonder if who's potentially also a cyborg. Because Queen's like undertaking modifications on himself. Like he's got the stretchy metallic neck. He's got the cannons inside of himself. So I'd be kind of surprised if others in Kaido's crew didn't have similar enhancements. Because he did have that cyborg guarding one of his islands, Scotch. And we now have confirmation like there's animals and things. Like there's a whole artificial angle that I've touched on before. I'm not going to get in depth into it again. But it'll be interesting to see if that goes any further, if it's just kind of seasoning that Oda was using. Which brings us to chapter 1006. Three straight chapters of shitty goodness, just one after the other. We had more shitty. My bet is on him heading towards Yamato rather than Kinemon and Co. Because again, latest chapter stuff that happened there. And a small digression again before I get through to this. I really need the One Piece fandom to stop overpraising the fuck out of Oda's LGBT rep just because he's now introduced two potentially transgender characters on Wano, one being Okiku, one being Yamato. And just based purely on the fact that because they're not, the horrific stereotypes that he's used up to this point. Like people are being like, "Oh my God, Oda's obviously learned from his past and he's trying to do better." Like, "Oh, he's becoming a better ally." Like, "Oh, Oda's doing so much better now. He's obviously learned where he screwed up and everything." Like, you all are so willing to go to bat for this man based on absolutely nothing except like the bare minimum of representation and circumstances in this thing of being like, oh, he's not treating these two characters like shit. And the funniest thing about this is then without an ounce of awareness, these same people turning around and then going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I really hope Shichi isn't going to go full transphobe on Yamato when he meets him. Like, oh my God, how's he going to react? How's he going to react? Like, do you all hear yourselves when you're saying this shit? Of being like, oh, Oda's learned so much better. Oh, but wait, he has this openly transphobic character who he keeps playing up for laughs. Like, oh, I'm sure that those two are not connected in any way. And I'll also admit, like, I'm not well versed enough in this to like comment on it more. And this is just more of a feeling that maybe, it's kind of me being overly picky on it. But it also feels weird that a lot of them are expecting him to be better about his transphobia, or Chichi being better about his transphobia around Yamato, purely because Yamato is more femme presenting than the other Okamas, Sanji's run into thus far, who are more, masculine presenting with like the overt feminine traits. I don't know, like just the fact that people are expecting him to react better to her, but react better to him because Yamato looks like a pretty woman doesn't sit right with me. But again, not well versed enough in that to make any more comments on that. But thought I'd throw this out there. Which brings me to my next comment, which I might get some hate for. But I had a good laugh at seeing Carrot having gotten beaten down by Perospero and him just kind of rubbing salt in the wound of like, oh, you thought you were gonna avenge Pedro, but oh, you're so weak, ha ha ha. Like, I just got a good chuckle out of this. And I'll admit, like, I've never been Carrot's biggest fan because I just feel like she's female Chopper. And I was always kind of ambivalent towards, everyone kind of being like, oh, Kara for Straw Hat, just because I didn't care about her that much. But then seeing like endless fan debate and like theory postings about, oh my God, and this big One Piece spread Kara's there right at the corner. Oh, that means Oda's included all the Straw Hats in there. That means she must be joining. The endless amount of like tired discussion I came across about whether she's going to join, whether she's not going to join, how she being presented, her dreams and all that. That just made me hate her so much. I've come to loathe her based on that alone. That's why I got like a good kick out of this because everyone's like, oh, she's going to beat Perospero here and then her dream and then her revenge will be complete. Then she'll join the Straw Hats to carry on Pedro's will. Like, all of that bugged me. And I'm also going to say I'm going to die on the hill of Pedro is alive and he's going to show up at some point in Wano, or we're going to get confirmation like through a cover story or something that he's alive. And I'm still stand by the idea that she is going to end up reforming the Nox Pirates with him. And that's honestly the feeling that this chapter cemented to me after seeing her get beat down as well. But yeah, I had a good chuckle with that. That was amusing. God, the rest of the chapter, like Oda trying to force this emotional Hyogoro stuff and be like, oh, look at the sacrifice he's making, like trying to get us to feel like sympathy or like sadness for Hyogoro's plight and like, oh, his final stand and everything. I couldn't give less than a shit about this man's death speech. Like, I have no reason to give a shit about him, and it's kind of insulting that Oda's spending what, like 4 pages, I want to say, I can't remember, it's going off the top of my head, 4 pages trying to be like, oh, come on, guys, you feel sad for him, right? Oh, cliffhanger, look, he's gonna get killed. Like, oh, look, they're gonna strike him down next chapter. It's spectacularly insulting to think that your audience is so dumb that you think they're gonna buy that, oh my god, we're legitimately terrified, Oda. What's gonna happen to Hyogoro? Is he gonna die next chapter? Like, no one is that stupid that they actually believe that you're gonna actually like fucking commit to killing this character on screen. And you could try to argue that, oh, Oda isn't trying to do that. He knows his audience is smarter than that, where he's trying to get you to speculate on like how he's gonna get saved, like what's gonna happen to him. That's what the stuff is like. No, I don't buy that. Like, you could do, if you thought his audience was that intelligent, he wouldn't end it on such an obvious fucking cliffhanger then at the end of the chapter. Like, you do something, you put the Yogoro moment earlier on in the chapter, end with a different cliffhanger if you didn't think his audience were dumb as shit. Like, honestly, one of my friends commented on this before, but like Oda's penchant for being like, oh, I need to surprise people. If my story is predictable, that means it's not surprising. And surprising is the only way to do good storytelling. Otherwise, it's boring. It honestly just feels like he's trying to prove how much smarter than his audience he is. Like, ha ha ha, look, I tricked you. Oh, look at me. You thought it was going this way, but no, 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 it went this other way. Like, Oda is a fucking grown ass man trying to pull one over on like, teenagers. And I don't know how you can't think that's just not sad. Like, it's just spectacularly pathetic. But again, I don't want to get too much into that because I know fans are going to be like, oh, Ash is being all negative and oh, why are you hating on it so much? But it brings me to Queen and King, who are the most spectacularly useless commanders and threats I've ever seen in the entire series. Like, I mentioned this earlier, but Queen is a literal joke. And it's kind of amazing, how much of a stark contrast it is to our first introduction of Jack and the ideas of Kaido's, calamities, you know, because during the Zoe flashback, like, I was still like, I didn't think back then even that Jack was a particularly compelling villain, but at least, kind of lived up to the name of being a calamity. He at least presented, a kind of threat to the Straw Hats, kind of like the Forces and the Minks and everything back then. And at least he gave, like, at least with his friends, like Zoe had that kind of good emotional resonance that the early series had a lot of. But like King and Queen, like, again, I've mentioned this earlier, like, neither has done anything up to this point to live up to their epithet of wildfire or plague. And I'm not really going to entertain the debate about, how Marco, it's only because Marco is the one facing that they look so bad. Like, nah, fam, like Queen the Plague's like the hyped up Queen the Plague with being like, oh, he's created this mummy virus, it's his patented creation, and this ice only, like, oh, no one's ever seen anything like it. And Chopper just like tinkers with it for 2 seconds. He's like, oh, I found a cure. Here you go. No big deal. Like, it's just completely pathetic that these guys are supposed to be like dangerous or a threat. And Oda had so much time to give these guys, more dimensions, like more depth or personality. But one is literally turned into a meme, which is Queen. And then King, we know like literally nothing more except, he's tall, dark, and mysterious. Like, I don't know what the hell Oda's going for. Like, again, you could probably bank on that Oda's trying to do, like, Oda's waiting for something. Like, once he gets the pieces into place, once they get into their hybrid forms, like how Kaido's gone into his hybrid form, that's when things are getting serious. But like, I don't know if even at that point, like, all the damage Oda's done is going to kind of offset them, like, maybe establish themselves as a threat once they go into their hybrid form. But we'll see. Like I was looking back at my old stuff yesterday, and like Wano has been dragging on for over 2 years now, and it's amazing how little has actually happened in like over 100 chapters. Like absolutely amazing. But the ending, I already got. Yeah, I already talked about this. How, like Oda just thinks his audience is dumb as shit. Which brings us to chapter 1007, which I was so convinced when I first saw the ending on TikTok. I'm like, this has to be a fake. There's no way that Oden is actually back from the dead. And then it turns out, no, it's not a fake. So I went to like see other fan theories of like stuff, what the explanation is. The most prominent one I've seen is it's a Conjuro drawing, which maybe sure. I mean, I guess that's the most plausible, but what's the fucking point of Conjuro coming down as Oden? Is he going to be like, oh, guys, yeah, it's so good to see you? Like, is he going to like backstab him once they turn around or something? Like, it's just going to be dumb. Like, again, it feels like a contrived way to bring Conjuro back into the plot again after how unceremoniously Oda just kind of disposed of him. Like, I guess that would make it like, yeah, I don't know. Like, even if that is ends up being the reveal, I feel like it would just be so stupid to have this be the cliffhanger and be like, oh yeah, it's actually Conjuro coming back. But that's honestly like the least dumb of the options I've seen. The other popular one seems to be the Katarina Devon is impersonating Oden, which I kind of entertained for a minute, but again, doesn't really make any sense as to why she would go down to the scabbards to impersonate Oden for some reason if Blackbeard was here. Like, it doesn't really make any kind of logical sense from a storytelling standpoint. The other theory I've seen being tossed around was that this one was the most. Actually, no, I'll go with the less stupid one and then I'll go to the stupidest one. I've seen some people speculating it's Onimaru Gyakamaru, the shapeshifting fox, Kawamatsu befriended in the flashback that collected all the weapons. I mean, I kind of entertain the idea as well, but I couldn't find anything in the mythology of the Daruma that suggested that the fox would be able to like transform or copy like different shapes and morph into different people. I don't think we haven't even got full confirmation that's what the fox has, because I know speculation is the fox ate the Daruma, like the mythical human fruit model Daruma, which is why I can transform into the giant bandit thing. But apart from that, there's nothing to suggest the fox could just randomly transform into other people. Again, like I don't think the fox knew about the plan or would know how to find the scabbard. So again, it feels like it'd be a bit contrived to kind of just have him randomly showing up and deciding to transform into Oden for some reason. The most amusing theory I heard regarding this was people actually spent like a good chunk of time in their reaction videos putting out the idea that it was Tama's teapot that was Oden. And I had to go back and look this up because I had no idea what the fuck people were talking about. But way back at the start of Wano, when Luffy and them run into Hitetsu, he's got this little Tanuki teapot. I think with the One Piece wiki's confirmed that we know like it ate the like raccoon fruit model Tanuki or some on a dog. It was dog fruit model Tanuki, and people being like, oh, because the title of the chapter is Mr. Raccoon Dog, and because the teapot is Mr. Raccoon Dog, it must be the teapot. Which I get because people are like, oh, in the mythology, Tanuki are actually known as shapeshifters, which would make sense, except for the fact that a Google search would show you and tell you that they already used the mythical model Tanuki in a non-canon, like I think it was One Piece game or something else, where someone had that exact fruit. So it's obviously not going to be the fucking teapot that just came in and been like, "Oh, I'm impersonating Oden to try to get your optimism back up." But I think the reason it's so amusing is the fans have deluded themselves into thinking that Oda's such a genius, that there has to be like some rational explanation for, bringing this character back. Because almost everyone I've seen is kind of commenting saying if this is actually Kozuki Oden, if Toki managed to, send him into the future along with herself, it'll kind of diminish the impact that his sacrifice had in the flashback and diminish, the impact it had on all the characters in this arc, right? And bringing him back kind of undercut all of that. And they have to convince themselves that Oda wouldn't do something so stupid and so like it's just such bad storytelling that there has to be some kind of secret explanation for why this character is back. That they're literally just reaching and grasping at straws to be like, no, Oda's not that dumb. He's a good storyteller. And it's hilarious seeing like how much they deluded themselves into this. But oh man, just wow. That said, I do have a personal theory I want to talk about, which I'll get into once I cover the rest of the stuff. I haven't seen anyone else talk about this theory just yet, so I think I'm good in that regard. I also am going to put a few caveats in front of it because I expect it to play out a little bit differently. But again, Oda rushing it wouldn't be a surprise. Is there anything else in the chapter? Oh my god. Okay, so I'll quickly touch on the Queen stuff before I get into that stuff and kind of wrap it up because I think we're hitting the time limit pretty soon. We're getting a freaking rehash of Punk Hazard with Queen being like, "Oh, you dumb shits that actually thought I cared about you." Like this is again where I'm kind of seeing like the bad storytelling, the bad development, like Oda trying to force an emotional kind of reaction in the storytelling. Is Queen is kind of going like, haha, you dumb shits, you're just useless fodder to me. You actually thought I cared about you, right? And the gifters are all like taken aback by this, like, what? You don't care about us? You just don't like you're not gonna protect us? At what point did any of you shits think that Queen actually cared about you? At what point in any of Wano, in any part in Wano, did Oda even try to like hint at the idea that somehow Queen cared about his subordinates or that Kaido cared about his subordinates? Like any of the Beast Pirates cared about each other to try to push this bullshit of like them being like, oh, we're gonna go over to Chopper's side because he actually cares about us. Like, we don't give a shit about the gifters. We don't give a shit about Queen. There's been no relationship established between them for them to suddenly have this thing of like, oh, I can't believe you're betraying us, Master Queen. Oh, this is so out of nowhere. Like, what the hell? Like, does anyone buy that this is good storytelling? Like, I don't know. Like, this is like a literal rehash of Punk Hazard. And again, like, it feels like Oda's insulting the intelligence of his audience by trying to get us to legitimately buy that we actually care about or have like any emotional reaction to any of this bullshit. And then, I hate cutesy Chopper's face so goddamn much. Like, it's just the most disgusting piece of shit I've ever seen. Like, it looks psychotic with how he's like got this wide-eyed, like, doll faces. He's like, oh, I came here just in the nick of time. Like, it just creeps me the hell out. Unsurprisingly, he's like, oh yeah, I found a cure and all that. It's a reminder to myself because I kind of semi-predicted Chopper doing exactly what he does in this in this chapter. My theory was more that this would happen over the mainland of Wano and we'd see Chopper Frankie teaming up. But I had this exact idea of Chopper's going to fire off a cloud of something, and it would look like the pink snow falling from what happened on Drum. So, again, kind of predictable, but that was just kind of an aside. Man, again, with like the viruses aren't meant to be used as weapons, like this feels like Oda just shoehorned in a plot to keep Chopper relevant. Because again, as I pointed out, like way back when I was doing the speculation stuff, Chopper kind of had like a non-reaction to the Abisu citizens. Like one of the more emotional, like the well done emotional aspects of one of the Oda had, he kind of just left by the wayside. And so for Chopper to have like his big like, oh, I'm calling out the bad guy moment for having like Queen be like, oh, how dare you use viruses as your weapons? Again, it feels like a rehash of Punk Hazard, not done as well. And it feels like it was shoehorned in just to give Chopper something to do. But yeah, don't really care about that. Him finally going into his monster form, though. Again, I've theorized before that this might potentially lead to Queen manufacturing rumble balls for Kaido's crew. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. I'm again putting that out there kind of just for posterity, pointing it out. Uh, the Vegapunk stuff, I don't know if I have much to comment on that. Again, I've theorized about this a long time ago. It's good to get confirmation that Vegapunk did use Kaido to create the artificial dragon fruit. I kind of call that. I'll have to get some more confirmation once we get to Kaido's backstory, because I also speculated that the artificial island he created was based on Punk Hazard, and then he might have been born or imprisoned there. Again, that could come back around to the Awakened Zoan stuff again at the end, which I guess brings us to the big twist of Oden being alive at the end of the chapter. So I was watching Drizzt stream yesterday, I want to say, and I think he's one of the few One Piece YouTubers who actually respect, because he does actually kind of critically analyze and break down like One Piece and talk about like the good or bad. So in his stream, he was also talking about how he was also of the mind that, it's either going to be a conjure drawing or something else, like it's going to be an illusion of some sort. But then he said, but he also came to the idea that, he wouldn't put it past Oda to actually have Oden be alive and be brought back to the present. And that kind of, because the reason I brought that up was that conversation got kickstarted into, all right, then is the silhouette at the end of the previous chapter, is that actually Toki and not Hiyori? Which, if Oda just undercuts himself by bringing back two characters he pretended he killed off, because we technically didn't see a body for either of them to confirm death, so Oda could kind of fake it out and be like, hey, I never said they were actually dead. You just kind of thought that by your own. I wouldn't put it past him. It would be bad storytelling. It would be horrendous. I would laugh my ass off if it turns out to be true, but we'll have to wait and see confirmation on whether that it is it or not. But my personal theory is that it's Oden's ghost, and that's kind of the camp I'm firmly landing on, mostly because I've been theorizing about this again for the longest time since this arc started, especially because of the whole Fire Festival stuff and because of the stuff we got with Kawamatsu back on Ringo. Him bringing up the idea of like, the swordsmen of Ringo carry their fallen comrades' swords back because the souls reside in them. The whole idea of the Fire Festival being a way or a night to remember the dead. That's kind of why I've been firmly landing in the camp of, yes, this is going to be a ghost, and they're only back because of the rush of powerful emotions present during this conflict. And once Kaido's taken down, once dawn breaks over the island, then the ghosts will all be the spirits will all be laid to rest, because they don't have anything kind of like anchoring them here anymore. I was more hoping or speculating it would go the direction of Brook awakening his devil fruit and, using his Soul King epitaph and powers to kind of raise the spirits one last time for the conflict before laying them back to rest. So if that ends up being the case, it's a little bit disappointing that Oda kind of just shoehorned it in again as just being like, oh no, the spirits just rose up for whatever, it's still not going to be optimal storytelling if that is what it happens to be the case. It is literally his ghost coming back, because of the rush of emotions, everything else. Would feel rushed, shoehorned in, but I think it would still be better than it turns out to be Conjuro's drawing or everything else, especially because I think it makes more sense to the plot, especially because with Hiyori, like we've had her whole thing of being like, oh, she wanted to play that song for her father in the flashback. And again, I speculated that we'd see her finally playing it to him for him to be going to rest, but we'll see. Like I said, I wanted to do this mostly for posterity, just to put the idea out there. So when we do eventually get confirmation, whether it's going to be the next chapter, a couple of chapters from now, I kind of go to this and point it out. I also wanted to talk about, because I hadn't seen anyone else really address this as a possibility, which I kind of found intriguing. So I figured I'd put it out there. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to put it out there. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the stream. I don't think I have much more to add or say. I hope you all enjoyed my ranting. I'm probably not going to do another one of these for a while unless something else really stupid comes up as a plot device again. Maybe at the end of April, May, when they do the Golden Week break, maybe I'll do another one of these in a similar format where I kind of just go through my thoughts, the quick thoughts through the chapters, especially because there's a break next week. So probably only get 3 or 4 more chapters before end of April, start of May. So by then, hopefully, there'll be some plot developments to talk about, or not. That said, thank you for everyone that tuned in. Hope you all like I said, I'll try to get back to the regular read-throughs and channel stuff the start of May once things have settled down. As always, if you like my content, please do like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Until next time, this is Ash. We'll talk to you all later.